The following video contains language that may be inappropriate for young viewers. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Welcome to Behind the Bars, where we bring the unseen and the unheard stories from the depths of the prison system to the forefront. I'm your host, Jason Boss, and together we'll explore the madness, the chaos, and the harsh realities hidden behind the steel doors of prisons worldwide. From the local jailhouse to death row across the world, we'll show you the isolation, the seclusion, and the decades spent enduring unimaginable conditions. These are the stories of survival, struggle, and humanity in places most of us will never see. We're here to shine a light on what society often forgets, the voices of the incarcerated. Each story is real, each voice is authentic, and every moment reveals the raw, unfiltered truth of life behind the bars. Join me for a journey like no other, a journey into the darkness, the truth, and the resilience of the human spirit. This is Behind the Bars, real life, real stories. Today we delve into the turbulent, violent world of Tom Raper, a man whose trail of destruction spans state lines and leaves devastation in his shadow. Join me as we uncover the story of a fractured childhood, a life unbound by rules, and the dark path that transformed a boy into a dangerous man. Due to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's incredible isolation technique, I was unable to get Tom on the phone. This is a response to a request for his life story. These are his words, and this is his story.
My name is Tom Raper Jr. I'm 54 years old, incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice system for capital murder and first-degree murder. This is my story. I was born in Fresno, California to Tom and Cheryl Raper on November 8, 1970. I have two sisters older than me, Tammy and Donna. Then after me, my mom had a miscarriage as she was rear-ended by a drunk driver and my brother Matthew was stillborn. Then came my brother Rodney, mom's pride and joy, the only brown-eyed child that took after her. Then Jeremiah, the baby of the bunch. I'd like to say that I was a good child and had a good childhood, but that would be a lie. My life of rebellion started at a very early age, the age of 4 when Rodney was born, the brown-eye boy. Before he was born, I was my mom's world. All her love and affection as I knew it was mine, but that all changed when Rodney was born. I can honestly say I remember these days as if they were yesterday. I constantly sought my mother's attention in any way I could, whether it be from a positive or negative way. At that time, my dad was in and out of prison, and mom shacking up with this or that guy. I can remember numerous lovers she had. Anyways, after Rodney's birth, I was very jealous of him, up to the point where I hated him, for he took my mother away. One day, mom heard him screaming. There I was in his crib with a pillow over his face, trying to smother him. Of course, the beating came, but that was okay. At least I had mom's attention. I continued my outbursts, stuffing newspaper under the car seats of her car and setting it on fire. Outburst after outburst. Then my dad got out of prison. At that time, we were living in Fresno, California. Mom was shacked with some ex-con named Don. Don was a big guy just like my dad. My dad was 6'2" solid, as all he did in prison was pump iron. Before coming to the house, my dad went out drinking with his brother John. And before the night ended, trouble found my dad and uncle, as they got into it with some blacks, and my uncle pulled a knife, while the black guys took off. But my dad took the knife from John, then came home. Upon coming into the house, Don met my dad there in the living room. Seeing Don, my dad snatched up a redwood table that he'd made before, that had all family photos and scorpions in it, then poured over to harden. Anyways, my dad picked it up and went to throw it at Don, but Don punched the table, splitting it in two, knocking out all my dad's front teeth, driving him to his knees. When my dad went down, he felt the butt of the knife gouging him in the back. Pulling the knife, my dad cut Don's legs to shreds, all the way up to his waist. This was the first time I truly witnessed real violence, as I was sleeping on the couch at that time. This was my first impression of my dad, a real badass, and he was my father. My mom turned my dad into the parole office, but Don held his mutt, didn't snitch because he was on parole as well, and told them he was cut up by some blacks. Throughout my childhood life, Dad was in and out of prison, but he always came home. Dad was a serious alcoholic and did speed and such, but when he would drink, he was mean and a violent drunk where he'd beat my mom senseless. I remember as a child, hiding in the closet with my sisters and brother Rodney, as Dad went through the house punching out every light bulb in the house. I knew at an early age who I wanted to please, as I had already lost touch with Mom to Rodney, so I seeked out the approval of my dad. My dad was more of a friend than a father. He taught me how to cuss, drink, steal, and I imitated my dad and turned on my mother in the same fashion and was praised for it from my dad. I look back and think about it all now and see a man that was really hurt and confused. I say this because when my dad wasn't drinking, you couldn't ask for a better man, loyal and true to those he called friend. But you'd have to wait in line for that man, 'cause the bottle had him most of the time. I know my dad and Mom loved each other. Why I say this is because they both married and divorced each other 4 times. Growing older, I learned to be rebellious, running away a lot, just to get out the house away from Mom, as hers and mine's relationship got worse and worse. I didn't feel her love, and I honestly at that time didn't love her. Mom was Cherokee Indian, mixed with German and Irish, Black Dutch, and was a woman with a heavy hand or whatever was close by to use. Sometimes it was crystal ashtrays or whatever, but it was coming. I remember one time when we were living in Minnesota, my mom locked the screen door, so I started to crawl through the rip in the screen. When I was knocked out by a flying ashtray, that hit me in the head. Another time, me and the brown-eyed boy got in a fight in the living room. I kicked my brother in the stomach. Next thing I know, she's trying to slam my head through a plate glass window. Then my sister Donna and Mom got into it, and my sister called welfare on my mom, and CPS came to the house to take my sister to a foster home in Wadena, Minnesota. I told CPS that I wanted to go to, and me and my sister left. But after a week, Donna wanted to go home. I didn't want to, and stayed there bouncing from home to home, till I started getting into trouble stealing, breaking into things. Then before I knew it, I was sent to juvenile detention, then to group homes, work camps, then to Sauk Center. That was like the next step to prison. At that time, I was 16 years old. At that time, all my family was living in Billings, Montana, and I was still locked up in Minnesota. My dad was wanted in the state of Minnesota for about $10,000 worth of hot checks. So my dad sent my mom to come pick me up for a visit from Sauk Center. But Dad was waiting at Dairy Queen, and he and I drove away to Scottsbluff, Nebraska. There we stayed for about 2 months drinking and partying, till my dad had enough of me and sent me back to my mom. She instantly called cops on me, and I was flown back to Minnesota to finish my time in Sauk Center. I then finally finished my sentence and went back to Montana, where my mom and dad were at. They were living outside of Helena at that time. Well, things were okay until Mom and Dad got into it. Mom called the cops. Dad went to jail. He was sent back to Minnesota to face the hot check charges. Of course, I was thrown out the house at that same time. That's when I met a bum that went by Reverend Red, who rode the trains, and I rode the trains for about a year or so. I saw a lot of beautiful country and met some interesting people. Tired of riding trains, I figured I'd head back to California. I got back to Fresno and was staying in my Uncle John's garage till I met this older woman and started to shack up with her. All we did was party, have sex, and go out at night and break into cars stealing sound systems. Well, one day I was high on dope, homeless, 16 years old. I broke into my grandma's house, yes, my mom's mom, stole her VCR, and was turned in by a so-called friend who wanted to get me out of the way so he could have Shane Mays, the girl I was shacked up with. Sent to juvenile hall, I sat there till I went to court. I asked the judge to send me to California Youth Authority just so I could smoke, and that was the turning point of my life for real. I was sentenced to serve out 6 years for burglary of a habitation in the California Youth Authority. Upon sentencing, I was sent to the Northern Receiving Correctional Center in Sacramento, California. There I would be processed, evaluated, and decided upon which unit I'd be sent to. While at NRCC, I became affiliated with one of the inside gangs, a white supremacy group called SWP, which stood for Supreme White Power. It didn't take long for trouble to find me before I was neck deep in it. About 2 weeks into my sentence, I was told to make sure I was at the chow hall, that things were kicking off between the North and South Mexicans, and that we were going to jump it off with the black. I went to chow laced and scared senseless. as I'd never been in a riot and wasn't looking forward to it either. Sitting there at the table, you could feel the tension in the air. Everyone was quiet and ready. Even the guards knew something was about to pop off. Next thing you know, this Mexican Northino from my hometown, Danny Juarez, jumped up, rushing this Mexican from the south, knocking him out. Then the whole chow hall was fighting. Me and my homeboy Speedy Rush got with this black kid at our table, beating him up, all for the name of the game. Speedy Rush was from Eastside Okieville, Stockton. That was a white neighborhood in Stockton, California. Well, from that incident, I was found fit to be in the California Youth Authority and was soon to be transferred to Carroll Holton in Stockton, California. Upon arrival, I was tested and had to get my bones, fight all the ride, brothers, then the Mexicans from the south, to make sure I was down for the cause. Then the following days had to fight the blacks. No, not all, just a few, that called me out to see if I could stand under the pressure of another color. It's one thing to fight with your own, but a different ball game with someone outside of your circle. I ended up serving 3 years and was given parole and sent to a foster home in Fresno. That didn't last long, as I went and took off running the streets, partying, stealing, living the life of a teenager on the run till I was caught, violated, and sent back to CYA. Once back in the system, I got back into the swing of things. Due to violent altercations, was sent to Ione, California, to one of the roughest youth authorities in the state, Preston. When I got there, they put me on for lodge, where I was told I needed to sell out. That for lodge was a catch-out lodge. Sell out meant that I was to handle business on a black or northern Mexican and go to the hole to get reassigned to another lodge. I took care of business and was sent to Greenbrier Lodge. There I did about 6 months, till I was released and sent out by plane to live with my mom and dad. My sister Donna picked me up at the airport and said, "Mom and Dad are on their way back to Minnesota. You can either stay in a shelter or I'll take you to Miles City, where Mom and Dad are waiting for you." I chose Miles City, never checking in with my parole officer. Went on the run. I ended up going back to Minnesota with my parents. There we moved to a small town called Pine River. It's there where I met my baby's mom, had our one-night stand, and 9 months later my daughter was born. From the start, I denied my daughter, even though my mom said she looked just like me. I was young, dumb, and still had a lot of wild oats to sow. Taking off, I went back to Billings, Montana. There I met a girl I really liked and cared about. She was pregnant with some other's kid when I met her, but I didn't care. She was pretty, cool, and fun to be with. We ended up shacking up. I was trying to slow down and be a man of the house, working odd jobs, but still had my hands in the dirtier side of life. Buy stolen guns, fencing them, selling them for higher profits. Then Tommy was born. I was there in the delivery room with Tara and delivered my boy. Sure, he wasn't my biological son, but in my eyes he was mine, as I was with Tara all these months, taking care of her. Yes, you could say I was in love, but still the old Tom was there, as I'd go out to the bars, get drunk, and fight anything that moved. Tommy was something I was hoping I could use to settle me down, but only time would tell. That wasn't the case. Once Tara had Tommy, we sent him to his grandma's house, as it was now time to party, 'cause I wouldn't let Tara drink our drugs while she was pregnant, and she loved to party, as when I first met her she scored me some acid, LSD, and that's how her and I met. The party was at my house. We were living in a trailer park there on the south side of Billings. We had some friends over, and friends brought some of their friends. Anyways, we're all having a good time, till this guy Arkell kept putting the moves on Tara. I told the dude to chill out, and he apologized. Next thing I know, I go into the kitchen to get a beer, and there he is doing it again. I say nothing, just walk up and punch him down. When I do that, I knock him into the knives that's on the kitchen table, as we'd been shotgunning beers. Well, he grabbed a knife and swung it at me, cutting open my hand. We wrestled, and I got the knife away from him, then beat him up with the handle of the knife. Messed him up pretty bad. Cops were called. By this time I'm pretty much out of it, drunk, stoned, tripping on LSD. Cops came in, tried to restrain me, but all the blood on my arm lost his grip, and I slammed my forearm into his lower back, messing the cop up pretty bad. Taking off, running out the trailer, I fell down the steps, landing hard on the ground, knocking the breath out of my lungs. Then other cops jumped on me, beating me in the head till I was unconscious. Later that night, I woke up in the hospital strapped to a gurney, with cops standing around me. I was then transferred to the Yellowstone County Jail for felony assault with a deadly weapon and assault on a public servant. The public servant charge would later be dropped. Bonded out of jail by my dad, I told him he was going to lose that bond, that I was on my way back to California, that they'd have to catch me before they sent me up. I went over to a partner's of mine, and he gave me his car for my Cameron. He had this big Chrysler New Yorker. I loaded up the car, and me, Tara, Tommy, and Tara's homegirl Tanzia Johnson headed out for California. We didn't get 200 miles before I threw out a universal joint on the driveline and had to do car maintenance all along the trip. Once we got to California, my parents and Donna's family all came out, and we met in Auburn, where we bought dredges and was going to camp on the river for the summer and dredge for gold. Just another party for me, really, as I didn't do much dredging as I spent more time partying. It was rough on Tara and Tommy, living on a riverbank, so Mom and Dad talked me into selling the dredge and renting a house. I sold the dredge, but instead of renting a house, I went up the coast on 101 and partied up and down the coast from Eureka all the way up into Brookings, Oregon. Finally, Tara gave me an ultimatum: find a house or she was leaving me, going back to Montana. We found a house in Auburn, but it only lasted about 2 weeks, as me and Tara fought every day till she was get up and called her in her mom's church. The LDS came and picked her up, and Tara went back to Montana. Broken-hearted, what else could I do? I left their house, went back to Fresno, running the streets doing meth. I sold my car and went to stealing mountain bikes to sell to my dealer to get more dope. But inside I was miserable. I missed Tara and Tommy, so I hitchhiked back to Billings, Montana. Once I returned to Billings, I had nowhere to go, so I went to my homeboy's house. His girlfriend answered the door. I asked where Gizmo was at. She said treatment. I said, so, who's taking care of you? She replied, you are tonight. From then on, I had a place to stay. I got back together with Tara, but things went the same, as now I was cheating on her, and I believe she was screwing around with this chick she used to mess with when she was in this group home. I kept coming around, seeing her and Tommy, but it was a cat and mouse game with the cops, 'cause the cops always found out where I was working and show up there or the house or whatnot. To this day, I think it was Tara's girlfriend calling the cops. Well, one night I was partying, and we stopped at the Reno Club. I went in to buy a liter of Bacardi 151. I didn't see the off-duty cop who recognized me from the night of the assault at my house, so he called it in. I walked out to the car, got in the back seat, and we drove off to the Quick Way store there on Jackson Street, getting out of the car to go in and get some Cokes. The cops pull up and flashes the light in my eyes. Tom Raper, he says. I tell him he's got the wrong guy, that I have ID, and reach behind my back like I was getting my wallet, close my hand into a fist, and come around punching him in the mouth. I took off running around the street, heading down Jackson Street to my homeboy's house, but the off-duty police officer was parked in the alley of the Quick Way and ran out trying to stop me, where I mowed through him, not missing a beat. I ran like there was no tomorrow, jumping through yards until I jumped into one with German shepherds that bite me up bad. The owner had been listening to his scanner and called cops, saying he thinks it's me in his backyard that his dogs were attacking. I was caught and sentenced to 6 years in Montana State Prison. Things didn't change while I was inside. I was the same old guy trying to fit in with the crowd and live up to the image. Inside, though, I was lost. I knew Tara was out there cheating on me, as friends told me what she was doing. What's so ironic is the fact that the girl I was cheating with, her old man, got out of treatment, and him and Tara hooked up. Guess it's true, we reap what we sow. I ended up doing 27 months in Deer Lodge, and I parole out to Minnesota, to this girl I met through my brother Rodney, name was Shelley Owens. She had a boy, good kid, but I knew off the rip she wasn't the one, and I wouldn't be around long. Well, Mom and Dad drove up from California to visit. They were staying with my sister in Motley. I went over and picked my dad up and went to the bar, as I had a tab there. We were drinking, having fun, catching up, but as the drinks keep coming, my dad, I get to be that lost man again, mean, arrogant, just the normal SOB that he can be when he drinks. My dad turns around and starts trouble in the bar with this local. I tell my dad to relax and let's just have a good time, but my dad is drunk and ain't trying to hear reason. I step up to the guy and tell him, "Look, if you have a problem with my dad, then he must deal with me first." The guy wants no problems, but this time I'm winking at this guy. He catches my drift, that I know he's done nothing wrong. I tell him he needs to leave the bar. He leaves, but my dad's pride is hurt. My dad turns on me, trying now to fight me. I tell my dad to chill out, but chill's not a part of his vocabulary, especially when he's drinking. I get mad and take his drinks and dump them into the gutter of the bar and tell him he's done. Fire lit up in his eyes. That was the wrong thing to do. Turning my back on him, I called to Shelley and her sister, who was shooting darts, that it's time to go. Then the next thing I know, I'm on the floor. My dad kicked me in the back. I jumped up, shoving my dad back, and he grabbed a stool, trying to hit me with it. I wrestled it from him, pushing him down, and told him to stay down, that I'm leaving. Shelley and her sister went out the door first. I followed. Me and Shelley are there on the walk arguing when the door flies open and Dad kicks me again. Me going down. I'm hot and ready to fight. I take off my cowboy boots and tell my dad I'm taking these off so I don't stomp you like a... And I used the N-word. Then I told him to come on and I laid into him. This was the first real fight I'd ever had with my dad, and the last after this day. I hurt my dad, and never in life should that ever be the case. Leaving the bar, I'm headed back to Staples, where I was living with Shelley, all the way arguing with her. We get there, I go in and start grabbing my stuff as I'm leaving. As I go out to put my stuff in the car, a cop shows up. "Are you Tom Raper Jr.? "Yes," I replied. I knew then my mom called the cops. Within minutes, my dad, brother, mom, and sister show up. The cop looks over at my dad and says, "You must be Tom Raper, Sr." My dad looks at the cop and with his middle finger sucks it, then tells the cop, "F*** you in the A." The cop slams my dad on the hood of my car. I knew what it was. My brother came at me and he and I got to fight. I knocked my brother down, but when I did, I hit him wrong and broke my hand. Then I hit him a couple times more and tell him to chill, that he doesn't know what's going on. My dad got away from the cop and he and I are fighting again. The next thing I know, Mom's on my back, scratching my face, trying to gouge out my eyes, then raking her nails down my bare back as my shirt was torn off me. More cops showed up. I was arrested. My dad was arrested, and brother was arrested. I was sent to Little Falls County Jail, my dad and brother to Wadena County. That day they released my dad from there because he had a fractured jaw and needed medical attention. Next day Rodney was released too, but I stayed in jail a week till my sister posted bond and got me out. My parole officer was pissed because she placed a hold on me, but for some reason it didn't show up. She wanted to see me in her office, but I had other plans. I'd met this guy who was from Arkansas. He was telling me about all these good licks we could hit in Little Rock, that we needed to head out to Little Rock. I told him I was down, but first I had to do something. Since getting out of prison, it had been on my heart to go see Bonnie, the mother of my daughter. I drove to Pine River to her mom's place and knocked on the door. Her mom answered. "You're not welcome here," were the words she said. I told her, "Mom, I'm not leaving until I see for myself if she's my daughter." Bonnie then came to the door, coming outside, standing next to my car, crying, "Why did you come?" "I have to know, Bonnie, is she mine?" Bonnie gave me a piece of her mind and telling me, "Of course she's yours." As her and I were speaking, this beautiful little girl come walking around the trailer, grabbing her mama's leg, looking up at me. Tears flooding my eyes, I saw a younger, prettier version of me, when I was her age, staring back at me. I knew without a doubt this angel was my own daughter. I made all these promises, but still the world had not been through with me. Leaving there, I pick up that guy from Little Rock, and again left the past and memories behind, Little Rock bound. Heading out for Arkansas, I left Minnesota dead broke, not a penny in my pocket. Going from station to station, we did gas runs till we made it to Little Rock. Once there, we headed over to North Little Rock, where Larry's sister lived. It wasn't nothing but a flop house, place for everyone to party and hang out. Larry's sister was beautiful, but a crackhead. I'd never done any crack up to that point. She got me to try it, but it wasn't my thing. Staying at the house was a old-school dude named Louis Cloud. Louis had been in and out the joints there in Arkansas. Good old boy. I told him I was looking for some powder, that I wasn't into the crack thing, He told me all they had around there was crack, but that he knew how to break it down using lemon juice. I started going to Silver City. It's a black neighborhood, where I started jacking them for their dope, then coming back to the house where I'd shoot dope with the old man. At the house one night, a friend of Larry's asked if I could give him a ride across town. Larry said the guy just got out the joint. So I went ahead and gave him a ride. Larry came with. Pulling into the drive, I parked behind this brand new Cadillac. We all went into the house to smoke a joint. The house was a nice house, and once we got inside, I could tell he had money. We went in and got high with this old man, about 40 or 50 years old. This guy pulled a trash bag of weed out. Good weed. Anyways, we smoked, then I got up and told Larry, "Let's ride." This dude I'd brought over there said give him a minute that he'd be out in a second. Once outside, Larry told me that the old man was a homosexual, that old boy was playing him. Old boy came out the house with a little money and pot and said, "Let's go." I'm sitting here looking at this Cadillac. I tell old boy, "Look, I'm fixing to jack this punk. Larry's gonna drive my car. Are you down?" Old boy says, "Do your thing." I knock on the door and the old man answers. Soon as he opens the door, I punch him down, dragging him to the couch. I tell him, "Look, this is how this is going down. I'm taking your ride, the weed, and your wallet. If you call the cops before a week, reporting anything, these two right here are underage and are going to say you molested them." He didn't want any problems. I got his wallet, opened it, and it didn't have any cash, but was full of credit cards. We left there and hit the highway, stopping at stores and gas stations to fill the tanks with gas. But every time we stopped, I'd buy 5 cartons of cigarettes. We left for Miami, Florida, and used those credit cards up. There in Miami, I sold the Cadillac for $3,000, keeping 2 for me, and gave $500 to Larry and old boy. When we got to Miami, it was Halloween, and Miami was jumping. Stayed in Miami about week partying till we were broke, then decided to check out the Keys. Went down to Key Largo, Key West, stayed there and partied some more. This old boy started getting sick, so I dropped him off at this homeless shelter there in Key West. Then me and Larry burnt off, heading back to Arkansas. On the way back, I picked up this hitchhiker named Spanky. He was out of California and just doing his thing. Spanky was a booster, so we'd pull up to Kmart's and any kind of store, and Spanky would go in and boost shopping carts full of stuff. Then we'd take it back in and get money at the return. He'd also boost carton of smokes. We did this heading back to Arkansas, but veered off first and went to New Orleans. There we partied a lot, selling the smokes at half price to the Arab and Oriental stores, then headed out back to Arkansas. Once we got back to Arkansas, I met a guy that ran a chop shop and started jacking cars off the car lots, taking new cars. Did this for a couple months, then was told about a Beretta that was at this mechanic's shop, and he'd give me 5 bills to get it for him. Me and Larry went to walk over to where the shop was, when Danya was walking back from the store. Danya was Larry's cousin, and I told Larry to walk her home, and I'd cut him in that I got this. I broke into the shop, fired up the car, it died. I tried it again, but wouldn't start because it had ignition problems. I saw cops, so I burned off, not knowing that Larry snitched me off to the cops. Larry and Danya were stopped by the cops for a curfew violation. Instead of going to juvenile hall, Larry told them where a burglary was going down. Not knowing any of this, I head back to the house. The cops show up about 20 minutes later and arrest me, and off to North Little Rock City Jail I went. North Little Rock City Jail. That jail turned out to be an experience all of itself. I was booked in, then went to a block. In the block there was me and one other white guy. The rest was black. The next day the blacks jumped this white guy. I jumped in and fought with this dude, 'cause I knew eventually I'd be next. So I figured I may as well just get it over with. We were moved downstairs to the dungeon, to a 8-man tank. In the tank, things were okay. We'd been there about a month. Had a few words with this dude named Derek Mumphrey. Other than that, things were cool. Up until they moved this new guy in named Tim Davis. That just got in jail for murder. Tim didn't have a mattress and was sleeping on the steel. I could feel the vibe and knew something was going to happen. Derek called me over by the bars to talk and wanted to bring up the old argument. I knew he was going to steal off on me, but turned my back on him still. Bam! This fool Tracy hit me in the face with a sock full of ivory dominoes, busting my head open. I took off swinging, but I was pretty dazed. Then I was hit from behind from Derek, knocking me to the floor. Then took a beating for about 5 minutes with the dominoes and a sheet that had a metal shower drain cover. They messed me up bad. My back had 2 crushed vertebrates and 3 broken ribs, not counting all the cuts and bruises. The white dude that I'd helped just the month before just sat there on his bunk and watched me get beat down. If it wasn't for the trusty, these dudes would have killed me, 'cause he went and told the jailers I was getting jumped. All this because their homeboy Tim Davis needed a mattress. About a month goes by and they move me back to the dungeon, and Tim Davis is still there, but they put me in the cell block next to him. The only thing separating us is the vegetable cage. I at that time had a shank made from the rack that went around the fire alarm, small steel rods. One day they were bringing Tim out for court, and I was standing by the bars waiting. Soon as he stepped in, I reached through the bars, stabbing him in the kidneys. I couldn't accept the ass whipping they put on me. That same night, I was transferred to the Pulaski County Jail there in Little Rock. In the county, it was a lot better, as there was more whites, and they stuck together. I ran with this guy named Deadeye. He was blind in one eye. I had his back and he had mine. For the next 9 months, he and I fought many times together against those that opposed us. I then got locked down and set for fighting. While there, the officers rushed into my cell, beating me up, sending me to the hospital. I called my dad in Minnesota, trying to get bond, but he couldn't help. Eventually, I was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and off to Pine Bluff Diagnostic Center I went. There in Pine Bluff, it was good. I could smoke and a lot more structure. Once they did the evaluation on me, they sent me to Grady, Arkansas, to the Varner unit. Soon as I got there, Captain Red called me into his office, telling me he's read my file and liked my style. He told me how most of the whites in this system are in PC, protective custody, or are punks, homosexuals. Reaching in his desk drawer, he pulled out a bag of weed, sliding it to me, said, "I'm working for him. Arkansas is the good old boy system, very racial, and they take care of their own. A lot of Ku Klux Klan work there. But on the flip side, black officers were racist, as well as they were gangsta disciples, also known as folks that work there." Captain Red told me, "If you catch a case, don't worry about it. I got you." I left his office with a sack of weed and was put in 10 barracks. I got to the unit with this guy named Johnny. Johnny was from Missouri. When we're at diagnostics together, he told me how bad he was, all these war stories, but the truth was soon to be seen. Me and Johnny were next to each other. The way the bunks are set up is in rows. It's just an open barracks that houses 100 men, 95% black. I'm making my bed as Johnny is sitting there on my locker box talking to me. This black guy comes up and addresses Johnny, checking him, telling him he's going to be in his box that he's riding, all the bees. Johnny ain't saying nothing. Finally, I tell Johnny, "Get your ass off my box." Then I turn to the black dude and tell him to get his ass out my housing area and take this with you. Soon as the black dude opened his mouth to say something, I took off on him. I beat him up, got the best of him. Then I was jumped by 2 of his homeboys. As I was getting beat down, I saw 3 black guards watching through the window. I knew then what time it was in prison. I came to the door and they let me out. I went down to 13 barracks where a guy I knew from county jail stayed, named Scott Dorsey. I told him what just happened and that I needed a piece. He said he didn't have no steel but a 14-inch rib bone. He gave it to me and wanted to come help, but he was about to go home, so I told him, "I got this." I went back to 10 barracks and took it to this guy. I tried to hit him in the stomach, but he jumped back. When he jumped, I ended up stabbing him on the inside of his leg. I tried pulling the bone out, but the muscles in his leg contracted, gripping it where I couldn't pull it out. I released the bone knife and went to punch him when I was tackled by the guards, handcuffed, and placed in a holding cell. Captain Red came and told me, "Damn, you don't waste any time. You can't go off killing and he used the N-word. That same day, I was transferred across the field to the Cummins unit. I got to Cummins and was told to stand in the hall and to not cross that yellow line. I stood there for nearly 10 hours before I was called into the captain's office. He was an old-school black man and racist as hell. He tells me, so you like stabbing my brothers, huh? Oh, okay. I'm assigning you to 7 barracks. The clerk that worked for the captain was a white inmate named J. K, which later would turn out to be a good friend of mine, comes to me and tells me, let me hold your stuff, 'cause you're going into 7 barracks and it all black, except 2 whites and they're punks. I told him I'm in the box with no one. He tells me it's not like that. You're going into a war zone. While you're fighting, the others are taking you shit. I left my stuff with him and went to 7 barracks. It was about 10 o'clock at night. The barracks light all out and my bunk was all the way in the back of this barracks. My heart felt like it was going to come out my chest. It was beating so hard. Never had I been as scared as I was then and there. All I could hear in my head was, it's a war zone in there. I went in and walked to the back to my bunk. I started to make my bunk and this black dude sat on my bunk. I tell him to get off my bunk. He smiles and tells me, this is our bunk. I took off on him, fighting with everything I had, trying to get back to the front as others jumped in trying to beat me down. I'm running, jumping over bunks, doing whatever it takes to get back to that gate. I'm leaking blood bad. They beat me senseless. I get to the gate right as it opens and run into the hall. I'm escorted back to the captain's office. He looks at me smiling. What happened to you? He says. You know what happened? I yell at him. He says, did you get me a name? Back then our names were on our shirts with our numbers. No, I tell him I ain't got no names. He tells the guards, well then put him back in there. They walked me right back to 7 barracks and opened the gate. Right inside the gate is 2 tables next to the bars. These 2 old-school black dudes were sitting there playing dominoes, and one looked up at me and smiled at me looking like a jack-o'-lantern, giving me that look like, yeah, white boy, here it goes again. I wasn't going in that barracks. I took off on that old school and jumped back in the hallway. They took me back to the captain's office and was told what I just did. The J. K tell the captain he's got a phone call. I hear the captain saying, aha, aha, yes sir, then hangs up the phone. He looks over at JK, giving him the dirtiest look ever and tells the guards, take him to the West Wing, put him in the cell with JK. JK saved my butt. He'd called the warden and told the warden what was happening. JK had already been in prison about 20 years, a stone-cold killer. Good dude, very respectful till you crossed that line. I stayed at Cummins for about 6 till I was sent to Tucker Max for cutting my celly up with a box cutter blade. I had been placed in ADSEG for fighting, and they put me in this cell with this white guy named Tracy Novak. It was summertime, hot, no air conditioning, and we're working all day in the fields, busting our butts with Aggies. And I tell my celly, Sant Fortenberry, said we're mainlining tomorrow, that we're doing ditches. Do you mind turning the light out early tonight? He says, I'm tired of bitch shit. I'm on the top bunk. I jump off the bunk and punch the light bulb out and see him reaching under my mattress trying to get my shank. I had a piece of rebarb sharpens up. He was trying to grab it. He did know I also had a box cutter blade. I graves it, slicing him across that chest, opening up a good 10 to 12 inches. He dropped to the ground screaming, begging for his life. Guards are now at our cell, flashlights and cameras on us, begging me to put the blade down. I surrendered the blade, made him catch the cuffs, then I did, and the next day I was shipped to Tucker Max. Tucker Max was a really good unit. There was a lot of respect there. Everyone there was there, 'cause they had done something serious to get there, and you recognized the mold of people you were dealing with. Tucker Max was all cells. There wasn't any barrack that had the bunk setting, but that didn't mean it couldn't get frosty real quick. Matter of fact, it wasn't long before trouble found me. I had been drawing cards, selling them for 40 cents each, a box of top cigarette tobacco. Well, I had this guy named Ricky Davis, who owed me 4 boxes of top. I didn't say nothing to him about it for 3 stores. I'm just waiting on him to pay me. Finally, I ask him, hey, what's up on those 4 boxes of top you owe me? He gets smart with me, so I tell him, look, go to the gym tonight. That's when he walks to the back of his cell, comes back and flashes me a knife and tells me, white boy, you ain't gonna with me. I dummy up on him and tell him, whoa, look, I don't want no problems with you, I'm sorry. I then shoot a kite to my homeboy Daryl Gaylor and tell him I need a piece. He ain't got one. I tell him it's going down in the gym tonight to set it up. He said all would be ready. I shaved my hair of, so the fool couldn't grab my hair. Then I took my big comb with handles on them and cut all the teeth off it, then melted razor blades in where I cut the teeth from and on the back side too. We went to the gym and I stabbed him 21 times. How he lived is only by the grace of Yahweh. He had 5 surgeries, almost died on the 1st and 3rd surgery. He lost his voice box, had to talk with this device he put to his throat. I blinded him in the left eye, cut his eardrum in half, really did a number on him. Way I saw it, he threatened my life first. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted what he owed me. The penitentiary is a whole different kind of environment. You either had to do something or you became someone's bitch, and Yahweh made me and please don't think I'm proud or bragging about any of this because I'm not. I'm simply telling my story of what it's been like coming up through the system and to where Yahweh brought me to. After that incident, I was sent back to Cummins. I didn't want to be there, so I paid the clerk and was transferred to Wrightsville. In Arkansas, all it took was a couple cartons of smokes and anything could get done. I liked it at Wrightsville. I was making good money tattooing and had some good friends there. I thought things were looking up and that I'd finally get to go home till someone snitched on my homeboy Ewok. The laws ended up riding down on him, hitting his locker box, finding my tattoo gun, 2 shanks, mine too, and some weed. They locked him up. A old school black dude, not on the racist thing, really good dude named Big Papa, came to me and told me that this inmate named Kozad snitched on my boy. I knew that was a lie, but I also knew Kozad was a known snitch. I knew Papa wanted Kozad out of the way because Papa sold all of the dope. I had a piece of plexiglass sharpened down, 'cause on Wrightsville, you had to walk through a lot of metal detectors. Anyways, Kozad is a big dude, 6'6", 280 pounds. He's sitting on his bed reading his book when I come up behind him, grabbed him by the hair, pulling his neck to the side, hitting him in the neck with this plexiglass. Snap! It broke! Kozad reached up, touched his neck, felt it bleeding, and went across the barracks, grabbing the push broom, twisting the head off, then went to beating me silly with the broom head. Hoo-wee. That was one time I loved seeing the laws as they saved my butt. I hurt so bad from that one, I had knots on top of knots. This time the staff were tired of me, and all these stabbing and never charged. They were now going to charge me. But once again I slipped through the cracks. I had a friend who worked in the warden's office. I paid him to get all my paperwork and destroy it, and have me transferred. He got it, and 2 days later I was transferred to Tucker, right across the field from Tucker Max. We got to Tucker, and Major Lucky was at the back gate. He opened my file, read it, and told me, "You stand right there, you're not staying on my unit." I was shipped immediately to Dermot, where I ended up having Hugh to use the knife again. Long story short, while in Arkansas I was forced to use a weapon to protect myself. Arkansas wasn't a nice place to do time. If you've ever seen the movie Brubaker, it was filmed on Arkansas State Prison System. I eventually was able to chill out and get released in 1998. There I caught a bus back to Minnesota, where I was to stay with my sister in Staples, but she kicked me out that same day because I showed up drunk. That night I stole a car. I drove the car out into the country and slept in it that night. The next day I met with an old friend, ditched the car, and stayed at his place. Same old Tom, just getting older. I got back to Billings. I went to my wife's, but I didn't love her, and we both went trying to make things work, so I told her it's over and that I'm going back to Minnesota. Once back in Staples, I moved in with my sister Tammy and her husband Jesse. I always got along with my oldest sister and her old man. I ended up getting kicked out though, 'cause I beat up Jesse in the bar on his birthday. He played a trick on my sister Donna, and my sister has a bad heart, and the trick he played made my sister have a heart attack where she had to take 2 nitrogen pills. Came off the dance floor and took off on him, ready for Rodney too, 'cause him and Jesse were close, so I fought them both, and Tammy kicked me out. I'd met like a week before this, a chick named Terry. I'd went to school with her when I was in a group home in Hackensack, Minnesota. I ended up moving in with her and her 2 kids. Things were really good, and she helped me get a job at Stearns Rubber. I was trying to seriously get my life together as I loved Terry and her 2 kids. Her ex was really abusive to her, verbally, and would do this in front of the kids. I really didn't care for him. One day I went over to Tammy's house to visit. Yes, we made up. Tammy wasn't there. Her and Jesse and my brother Jeremiah were out at the lake drinking and swimming. My nephew Chris told me that his friend is looking for some tattoo work, that his dad would sign for him. I went to his house and talked with his father, and yes, he had no problem with it, but didn't have the money, so he and I worked out a deal for a 7.62 Russian rifle and a .38 pistol, long nose. I went back to my sister's, and I'm doing the work on this kid when everyone returned from the lake. They were all drunk and a real loud crowd. My brother Jeremiah is trying to start a fight with Jesse, and Chris is trying to get into it with Jeremiah too. I go into the kitchen and tell Jeremiah to chill out, to respect Tammy's home. Everything is cool for about 30 minutes, then I hear a crash. I go in the kitchen to see what happened. Jeremiah dropped his keys, but him and Jesse were back at it. This time Jesse was reaching for a hammer that was on the counter. I pushed my brother out the way and told Jesse, "Grab that hammer if you want to. You're my brother-in-law, this is my brother, and I'll end you." My nephew tried to tell me, but I was in a zone and only was focused on Jesse. Jesse stopped and raised his hands. I told Jeremiah it's time to leave. He then tried to fight me. Told him you can't whip me sober, let alone drunk, now go home. He kept persisting to fight me, so I tell him, okay, let's go. He goes outside, I close the door and lock it, then tell him, go home. The door is a glass door. He reached and grabbed this shovel that was leaning next to the door, smashing the glass, cutting open my forearm. I'm pissed. I come through the door at him. He's on the grass with his arms up ready to fight, but he's so drunk I feel sorry for him and just slap box at him, not trying to hurt him. Tammy is drunk too and tells me she's calling the cops and better leave. Jeremiah yells at Tammy, "Tell the cops, Tom's got a gun." The guns were in the house, but Tammy didn't know this, but she told the cops this. I grab the guns and burn off, hiding guns in the bushes. I go to the other neighbors that were a friend of mine's and call Terry and tell her to come pick me up. She comes and I grab the guns and we go back to the house. I drop her and the guns off, then I take the car and take off, trying to think. I drive around for a couple hours, then I call Terry to find out what's being said. The cops told her that Jeremiah told the cops that I beat him up and put a pistol in his mouth. All lies, never was a gun ever involved. I told Terry that I would park the car at the newspaper office where she worked, that I'm going to then walk to the house and turn myself in, as the cops were at my house. I walked up to the cop. He about shot me, being scared. The cops took me to the station and asked me what happened. I didn't lie to them about anything, not even the guns. They said they believed me, but that the judge would be the one to sort it all out, that I'm being charged with felony assault and felon in possession of a firearm. I was taken to jail and was looking at 30 years in prison. My family all tried to talk to Jeremiah to come forth and tell the truth, but he said no, that he would then go to jail for perjury. My sister couldn't take it, that I was facing all this time behind her being the one who called the cops, so she overdosed on pills and died. It wasn't the pills that killed her, but an aneurysm. She had an aneurysm at the back of her skull, and from the pressure from the pills, it exploded. Tammy's was dead when the EMT got to the house. She was resuscitated and brought back after nearly 8 minutes of not breathing. Terry called the jail, and I was informed of all that happened and was escorted to the hospital to see her. I didn't recognize her because her head was swelling so bad. I asked the doctor her conditions. She said she probably wouldn't make it 72 hours, and if she did live, she'd be a vegetable due to the lack of oxygen to the brain. I left the hospital and went back to the jail. There I got down on my knees. There on my knees I cried out to Yahweh, asking him to let her live, spare her life and take mine instead. I told Yahweh that she's got 2 kids that needs her and that I've been a screw-up all my life. But if you don't want my life, then spare us both and I'll serve you the rest of my life. I felt a calm peace come over me and heard a voice, no, not audibly, but in my head, that she would live, but that I'd die in prison. That Wednesday, I went to the library there at the jail for the weekly Bible study and told the volunteer chaplain, Brian Uthout, what Yahweh said. He tells me that he dreamed that I was going to get out of jail and that Yahweh's got plans for me. A couple weeks later, I'm released from jail on my own recognizance, but on a leg monitor. I'm back at the house, and things are good. My sister recovered and was better than before. Yahweh healed her. Then, like 2 days after getting out of jail, Terry's ex calls cussing her out. I take the phone from her and tell him he's not going to talk to her like that, then hung up on him. He called CPS, telling them he didn't feel comfortable with a violent offender being around his kids and living in the home. I get a call at work from Terry. She's crying and tells me that CPS came and took the kids that her ex has them because I'm in the home. I go home from work and call my friend Kenny and ask him, can I stay at his place? He said yes. I then call the monitor place explaining the situation, and they transfer it to Kenny's place. I moved to Kenny's, and Terry got the kids back the next day. I told Terry to stay away until this case was over, that she can't take any chances of her losing the kids to her ex. But Terry was in love and kept coming around. I told her to stop, that she had to think about the kids, that she could always find another old man, but her kids couldn't be replaced. I loved her and those kids. They were my life. Terry kept coming around. I met this chick named Stephanie. I told Kenny, look, Terry is coming over. I'm going to leave the door unlocked, and I'm going to run her off. I told Kenny what I was going to do. Terry showed up and walked in the house. I was on the couch, screwing Stephanie. Terry walked out the house and went and stood by her car, standing there just waiting. I pulled on my pants and went out. I know what you're trying to do, she said. She was hurt, but she knew I was trying to run her off. She just didn't get it. She had to think about those kids and their life. She didn't want to lose me and couldn't stay away. I couldn't take the chance that her abusive ex would get the kids, so I threw my life away to further their future. For once, I'd do the right thing. Least. That's what I thought. I went into the house and told Stephanie that I'm leaving for California. You feel like riding along? She said yes, and I cut off the monitor and went on the run. I started doing burglaries everywhere I had the chance. I started in North Dakota, Montana, Washington, Oregon, California, Nebraska, to name a few. I didn't use any gloves, didn't care about prints, because I knew once they caught me, I was going away for the rest of my life. I ended up going to California. There I hit some houses that had guns and gold coins. I sold the coins and some of the guns to my dad for his car. Then me and Stephanie took off. I'm still hitting burglaries, heading up through Nevada. But there me and Stephanie get into it, so I drop her off at a truck stop, and I head up into Pueblo, Colorado. There I meet these two guys that just got out of jail. One's guy I didn't care about, 'cause he was looking all in my car like being nosy. I check him, telling him, does something belong to you in here? His name was Clifford Espinosa. The other guy was Hiram Vaudry. He went by Horse. I ask him, does he know where to get some dope? Says yes, and we go to get it. I tell him I'm headed for South Carolina, and he said he'd like to come. I tell him that I'm on the run, and this ride is headed straight for hell. He said that's cool, that he's down. We stop and pick up his stuff, and his friend wants to come too. I didn't like this dude, but Horse said yes. Good people to give him a chance that we'd gotten off on the wrong foot. I said okay. He introduced himself as Mexican from Hell. We leave Pueblo and head into Texas. As Mexican from Hell said, he knew a place in Texas we could hit for a lot of drugs and money. So we're going to Texas to hit this lick. On the way, we're drinking and getting high. I pulled over to stretch my feet, and there I give .22 revolver to Mexican from Hell to check out. Him being drunk loses the pin that holds the revolver in. I get mad and toss the revolver. I still had a double-barrel over and under sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. We leave there and enter Texas, but on the way, I'm steadily hearing from the two of them how bad they both are. I pull into this liquor store to get some more to drink, and figured we'd see if they're as bad as they say. Mexican from Hell is passed out in the back seat, so I tell Horse, look, we're gonna hit this place. Are you down? He says, yeah, let's do it. I tell him he better not freeze up. I send him to go in first, then I come in behind him. He's over by the cooler area where the beer is, and the clerk is behind him. It's a woman. She's standing by all the bottles of whiskey. She turns around to face me and sees the gun. I tell her it's a robbery, but instead of cooperating, she grabs a bottle of whiskey, trying to hit me. I just shot, hitting her in the head. There was no turning back now. Horse is freaking out. I turn the gun on him and tell him to buck up, and he gets his composure. We either get the money, some beer and whiskey, and leave the store. Out in the parking lot, I give him the gun, just really to see what he'd do. We get in the car, and yes, shaking so bad that he discharges the shotgun into the floor of my car, blowing out my brake line. When the gun goes off, Mexican from hell wakes up, and Horse says, "Man, he just smoked her." I look at him and give him that look. Now, Mexican from hell is tripping, talking about let him out, as he could feel something happen and wanted no part of it. I tell him, "Chill, dude, Horse was just messing with you." But he knew that wasn't the case. He kept saying for me to pull over, that he wanted out, then said he needed to piss. So I pulled over going through a fence, so that we were in a field. I then pushed the gun to Horse, who looked at me, then shook his head. Mexican from hell got out, then Horse stepped out and shot him in the head. He got back in and we left. I didn't know that from me driving through the fence. My license plate got ripped off, staying at the crime scene. We went to Florida, Texas. There I rented a motel and knew life was over. I called my mom and dad and told them what went down. Mom didn't believe me at first, but I told her I'm not playing. She begged me to turn myself in, but I told that's not going to happen, that I'm not going back to prison. They'll kill me first. Mom asked me to do one thing for her. Put my phone number in your wallet so they can call me. I told her I'd do that. The next day we went out to get in the car. That's when I saw all the brake fluid all under the car. Then when we left, I barely had any brakes. We pulled over at this ranch right outside of town, hit the house, and in the garage was a Cadillac SUV. It was brand new and had the keys in the ignition. I had Horse drive my car, and we dropped it off about 5 miles down the road, then crossed over the state line in Oklahoma. Went to Altus. There I pulled into this store and wired my mom $300. Came outside and saw the lights were on the SUV, but didn't think nothing of it. But turns out that the OnStar that was on the vehicle turned it on, that it was reported stolen. I didn't know anything about OnStar as I'd been locked up all my life. We got in, and I was driving heading towards Lawton when a highway patrol car was heading towards Altus. Then he goes down through the center and gets behind me, turning on the lights. It was time. It's going down. I pulled over, and the cop opens the car door, stepping out. He kneels down behind the car door, gun drawn. Turn the vehicle off and put your hands out the vehicle window. Open the door from the outside. He yells. I come out the window with the shotgun blazing, piping 2 shots at him, peppering the car door. Then I slam into gear and take off. The cop's fine. The door took the brunt of impact. He jumps in the car pursuing me. I take a off-ramp and turn over the overpass, heading into the Wichita Reservoir Mountains as the cop pursued. There was a major shootout with him and the game wardens. I ended up going off-road, turning the SUV into 4-wheel drive. I got away. Horse stepped out the vehicle, stepping between 2 rocks, twisting his ankle, breaking it. He was on his own now. I grabbed the gun and went hiking through the mountains. Horse limped his way to a roadblock. There he turned himself in. The next day I was arrested as I was trying to steal a motorhome. I would have never made it out of there, because they had all access out blocked off. I was transferred to the Comanche County Jail, where I was charged with shoot with intent to kill on various charges, which would later be dropped when Texas came to extradite me back to Texas for murder and capital murder. I was read my rights, then transferred to the Comanche County there in Lawton. Once in the jail, they put me in a cell with Horse. He already had a cast on his foot. The next morning I was taken upstairs and was seen by the judge, read my rights again, and was being charged on multiple counts of shoot with intent to kill. I was given my paperwork and brought back to my cell. I began to read my papers, saw that I had a $2 million bond. But what was odd was that Horse had a $25,000 bond, and it said he was a material witness. Came to find out later that he told the cops that he was a victim, that I took him as a hostage, that he was a hitchhiker. I read that he was to be a material witness that told me one thing: snitch. I got my tray at lunch and broke it. There I sharpened it up and made a shank. I planned on killing him that night when he went to sleep, but thankfully for him that didn't happen, because the Texas Rangers would come first. They found the body of Clifford Espinosa. They called Horse out, and he made a statement that I did all the killings and that he had nothing to do with it. They then called me out. I didn't give a statement at first. I was trying to play coy, but then the ranger played horse's testimony and I saw he was blaming everything on me. I planned then to go back to the cell A and do him in. On the way back to the cell, I hear the ranger say, "Bring the other one again." The jailer tells the guard, "Josu's escorting me to grab my cellie." That's when the ranger yells at the jailer and tells them to separate us. Later. That night I'm called back out and the ranger shows me horse's statements and all. I was thrown under the bus, being charged for murder 1 and capital murder. I didn't care anymore and then set the record straight on what actually happened. I waived expedition, and that night sent back to Randall County Jail where I was booked in for the murder of Clifford Espinosa. There, they placed me in administrative segregation due to the nature of offense and my violent behavior. In my own cell with a shower, I sat trying to make sense of it all. I called my mom, told her where I was at, the charges I had, and faced the death penalty. Mom broke down. Last few years, me and Mom started to get along. I just faced reality that she wasn't going to change, and I loved her for her. We were actually a lot alike. I think that's why we butted heads so much. Mom tried to be supportive and comfort me through the pain, but I was broken, and in my brokenness, I lashed out with violence. To numb the pain, I started fighting the guards, tearing up my cell. I was breaking stuff, making shanks. I was planning to escape from the jail. The cell I was in was there next to booking, right next to the garage, and that spelled freedom. I knew from doing time how to open the cell door using a sheet to slip the locking mechanism, but got busted doing it. They came in the cell, found the shanks, then placed me in a booking cell for 2 days, as they had maintenance come in and cut everything out, cell except bunk and shower. I no longer had a table or anything in there I could make a weapon out of. Then they placed a padlock on the outside of my door, so I couldn't come out. The medical people said they were putting me on Valium to help me cope, but I never took it as I didn't want to be all doped up. I started getting sick from eating my trays, as I'd eat and feel really high. I knew the officers were putting something in my food, 'cause I felt drugged every time I would eat. The Texas Ranger came to see me. He was there trying to clear up some old cold cases out of Montana and Minnesota, as they thought I was a serial killer, and those 2 states asked the Rangers to question me. At first I told them no, but as I thought about it, that would give me a chance to escape. So I told them I did them, but I didn't know anything about them, so they knew I was lying and moved on. One day the ranger came to see me. I interrupted him and told him why every time I eat my food I feel drugged. The look on his face said it all. He knew what was going on. Then he got to stuttering. His body language gave him away, and it confirmed to me they were trying to kill me. I told him, "Look, I ain't got nothing to lose, so this is my only warning. If I get sick one more time, I'm going to kill one of these guards." After that, nothing was done to my food. I didn't get sick anymore. I chilled out for the most part, had the woman's tank behind me in the pipe chase. I used to talk with this girl. That was all into me, down for me all the way. When the woman would go to the library, they'd walk past my cell, and this girl would slip me candy bars and stuff under my door. I was even given a shank she made for me. Once I was sent to prison, her and I would write and stay in contact nearly 3 years. Anyways, I got tired of sitting there in the county jail, as it was driving me crazy. I told my attorney, "Look, you and I both know they're going to send me up on this. Go speak with the judge, get me a number, and I'll sign. Send me to prison." He went that day, spoke with the judge that afternoon. I was in his chambers signing for 60 years on murder 1. The next day I was transported to the Bird Unit in Huntsville. They hurried up and got me out of their county, but little did I know that's where all the real hell would begin, as TDCJ was and is a world of its own. In receiving, I was booked in at the Bird Unit, head shaved, given a shower, deliced, asked all kind of questions, then saw by medical and the psychological doctors. They saw that I was on Valium in the county, so they said they would need to send me to Skyview to detox me from them. I told them I didn't need detox, that I wasn't taking them, but was sent to Skyview still. Skyview wasn't no detox center, it was a mental health facility, and a place where they do their dirty work. I was transported there by van that night, and was placed in a cell butt naked, placed on suicide watch. I asked why they were doing that to me, that I'm not suicidal. They said it's standard procedure. The next day I saw the doctor, told him I wasn't suicidal, nor was I in need of detox. He discharged me, gave my clothes back, and I waited chained back to the bird unit. This is when life, as I knew it, would begin to turn into a living hell for the next 24 years. I got back to the bird unit. There I was placed in administrative segregation, as they were determining if I could go to population or was I a confirmed gang member. I told them I'm from California, that I'm not a part of the Texas gangs, but TDCJ had other plans for me. That night I began feeling drugged again. I came back from Skyview, and at chow they brought me. I will never forget it, as fried chicken, mashed potatoes and gravy, corn, biscuits, brownies, really good tray, so good that I ate it all and got really bad sick. I was vomiting, body burning up inside, gasping for air. I was tripping, paranoid. I knew I was about to die. I told the laws and they just laughed. I flipped out, trying to get help, but none was to come. They came and got me, cuffed me up, and shipped me back to Skyview. That's when I'd see the true evil that lurks behind these prison walls. I would experience that night what true evil is all about, and see that I was inside a prison system that was corrupt, a law within themselves, a organized and demonic force that has no mercy or value for the sanctity for human life. I was reaping what I'd down, now in the belly of the beast. This is my story behind the walls, a story that's true, a story that's sinister, a story that is unfathomable but so real and true. As you'll soon learn, a beast lurks within these walls, a hidden society from the outside world. Their agenda is to seek justice and revenge in their demented ways. Most of what I'm about to tell you, you'll have a hard time understanding that this could happen. A saying goes, it's not what you know, but what you can prove.